This is The World This Weekend. Good evening, I'm Chris O'Neill Yates. Tonight, the war in Ukraine could be entering a new phase. Ukraine says preparations are finally ready for its military counteroffensive.
They are building up to something big. It may not all begin with a huge grand explosion, but they're definitely building up to push the Russians back.
Also tonight, as more wildfires come under control in Alberta, evacuees are eager to return to their homes.
We were like, oh, it'll just be a couple of days, and now we're 3 weeks and we're like, oh, please let us go home.
And we hear from the people behind a new drama series about the 60s scoop.
We have the power to amplify things that have been in the dark and have the power to change people's minds.
That's later, but first. Security officials in Ukraine say soldiers and equipment are in place to launch its counteroffensive against Russia. The push has been expected for weeks, but now it's believed that military equipment the West promised has finally reached Ukraine. And as Philip Lee Shannock reports, despite some bold words by Ukrainian officials, Kyiv still wants to retain an element of surprise.
It looks like a slick Hollywood movie trailer. All that's missing are the words, "coming soon." It shows General Valery Zaluzhny standing in dawn sunlight. In the morning fog, Ukrainian troops are shown training on Western equipment, including German-made Leopard 2 tanks and U.S.-made HIMARS rocket launchers. Soldiers and their commander chant a defiant message. Ukraine, my native motherland, Lord, our Heavenly Father, bless our decisive offensive, our sacred revenge, our holy victory. In an interview with BBC, Ukrainian National Security and Defense Council Secretary Alexei Danilov says the offensive to retake territory seized by Russian forces could happen at any time. It could happen tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, or in a week, he says.
Well, this has been expected for a long time, actually weeks now.
Andrew Rasulis is a retired Department of National Defense official. He's now a fellow with the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. He says the Ukrainians are now equipped to take the fight to Russia.
That would put them in a position to do one of two things, which is to push the Russians right back to the Russian borders of 1991, or to negotiate something of a ceasefire in the fall from a position of strength.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been on a world tour recently to the G7 meeting in Japan and the Arab League summit in Saudi Arabia, shoring up international support and commitments of military equipment.
It may not be what we expect. It may not all begin with a huge grand explosion.
Jenny Mathers is a senior lecturer in international politics at Aberystwyth University in Wales. She specializes in Russian politics and security. And she says while it may appear that they are tipping their hand, Ukrainians want it known that the counteroffensive is on track.
Because after all the investment of resources and time and training Ukrainian soldiers, I think there's been a lot of anticipation about this counteroffensive and when it's going to happen. So I think part of this is reassuring the West.
And she says while the public relations war is kicking into high gear, in some ways Ukraine still maintains the element of surprise. Philip Lee Shannock, CBC News, Toronto.
Turning now to Alberta, where the wildfire situation is improving. Rain this week has aided firefighting efforts, but dry weather this weekend has officials on alert. There are now 49 active wildfires in Alberta. More than 1/4 of them are considered out of control. Fires are also burning across BC, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. As Sam Sampson reports from Regina, many prairie communities are still in precarious situations.
I went to the grocery store and I was like, okay, I gotta buy a bunch of stuff.
Madeline McKechnie sits in a hotel room in high-level Alberta. She's been living there for 3 weeks. At this point, she just misses the little things.
And I came back and I was like, okay, time to eat. Didn't buy forks. Didn't think of that.
Wildfire forced McKechnie and others from their homes in Rainbow Lake, an hour's drive from high level.
We didn't think we would be evacuated, and then it happened. And we were like, oh, it'll just be a couple of days. And now we're 3 weeks and we're like, oh, please let us go home.
Rainbow Lake is still under an evacuation order. Fires in Alberta forced thousands out of their homes since the start of May. Most have gone back, thanks to rain and relentless firefighting, but it's not over yet. Today, the federal government extended the military presence in Alberta to keep the remaining out-of-control fires at bay, and reinforcements keep coming. A video from an Australian firefighting service shows staff landing in Edmonton Friday, fresh to face the flames many have tirelessly worked to extinguish for weeks. And with fire comes the smoke. A special air quality statement lingers in northern Alberta, southern regions of the Northwest Territories, and northern Saskatchewan.
Pull those two tabs to open it. You have two filters in this area.
That's why the Lac La Ronge Indian Band in Saskatchewan set up almost a dozen air scrubbers in its 6 northern communities. The filtering machines are in elders' homes and community centres, most on loan from the province and the Red Cross. But Chief Tammy Cook-Searson says her team bought 20 more.
If and when they need it, it's available. So when we have the air scrubbers or the clean air facilities that are set up, we have chairs, food, cots, whatever, in case someone just wants to go there for the day, or if need be, we'll set it up so it's an overnight shelter for clean air.
Further north, Yellowknife's fire ban is over as of today, but areas south of Great Slave Lake, like Hay River, still have what the territory describes as extreme fire danger. Because the situation, like the winds that help spread fire, can change quickly. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Regina.
In the Northwest Territories, the town of Hay River has been spared. Officials say a nearby fire is being held, but residents of the neighboring First Nation are still stuck in Yellowknife, unable to return home. The CBC's Leanie Lambrink now on what the same fire has done to their land.
It's a marsh area.
Joe Tambor points to a spot on a map, an area more than 3,000 hectares in size marked with the yellow line. All that reserve land has burned so far since mid-May near Hay River and at his home, the Katlo-Dache First Nation Reserve.
There's a lot of vegetation, a lot of animals.
The town of Hay River and Katlo-Dache were forced to evacuate on May 14th. There's been no damage to Hay River, and many of the town's residents were allowed to return home this week. But on the First Nation across the river, members are still waiting to see the full extent of the damage. Officials say more than a dozen buildings in Katlo-Dache have been burned. Residents say the fire tore through people's homes.
It's very heartbreaking.
Anna Casper is a Katlo-Dache member.
There's a very old elder that's buried in there and a young child that he had raised.
She points to a spot on the map in the middle of the burn area, which she says is sacred.
It's like really, really bushed. It's hard to get to.
The land was also once a lush habitat for animals, which some Katlo-Dache members hunt for sustenance.
Caribou, bear, moose.
Peter Sabrin is a band counselor. He's also part of the community's Hunters and Trappers group.
In the spring, the birds come around there and they have resting places and stuff like that there.
Joe Tambor is most worried for the bears. The flames could spook them and push them toward human settlements. Earlier this week, George Buggins, who does security for the band, killed a 3-year-old black bear, which he says was stalking fire crews.
They just go into a protective mode and then, they'll just attack anything.
The full extent of the wildfire's damage is not yet known. Tambor expects some animals that have fled will take years to return.
Little mice, squirrels, those things like that. It's their area, and if they get burned and then they have no place to go, they're going to move away from that area for maybe 10 and 12 years.
The fire is still burning. Officials say it's being held. That means it isn't expected to grow so long as conditions don't change for the worse. Leanie Lambrink, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Canada will soon have a national dental care program. It will initially offer oral health care for low-income earners, seniors, children, and people with disabilities. But for people with certain disabilities, just accessing a dentist is difficult. So advocates are asking the federal government to make urgent fixes to their program so that all patients can be treated equally. Bethany Lindsay reports.
Can you sleep when your teeth are hurting? No. How about eating food? Is it hard to eat when your teeth are hurting?
Yeah. Leslie Godin started complaining to his mom Rachel about tooth pain in February. An x-ray showed he needs 3 root canals, but Leslie can't get that work done at a dentist's office.
It's a type of cerebral palsy where he has quite a bit of involuntary movement, and having any stimulation in his mouth makes that really challenging.
Leslie needs general anesthetic for all dental work, so he's stuck on a waiting list at Vancouver General Hospital. He has an OR date in June, 4 months after the problem started.
The waiting's been hard.
Advocates say long waits are just one barrier to oral health care for disabled Canadians. Ottawa has promised coverage under the new National Dental Care Program. But the Canadian Society for Disability and Oral Health says there are urgent accessibility problems. Dr. Paul Romanson is the Society's president.
We want to get people so they can speak and smile, have good self-esteem, they can chew their food and not have stomach problems. It's all one big package.
They've written to the health minister calling for changes to the system. That includes money for regular preventative care, mandatory training for dental professionals, fee structures that allow more time with disabled patients, and accessible clinics no matter where you live.
We all deserve to have quality and the same type of care. And unfortunately, this is what I don't see happening.
Dr. Maria Salome Lomlomshian's Mississauga clinic handles patients with all kinds of disabilities, from children with autism to seniors with dementia. She says there's little training in Canadian dental schools and not much incentive to treat disabled patients.
Colleagues told me, why you're doing this? You should quit and just dedicate your profession to be doing implants or doing regular care. You're going to make more money. You can see more patients during the day.
At McGill University, the dental school offers clinics for people with some disabilities, but the dean, Dr. Alam Amami, says education is a major issue.
This moment, we don't have a program in Canada that it is designed for this. A starting point is universities. Until we don't have trained dentists, we cannot really totally address the needs.
The Canadian Dental Association agrees that there are some gaps, and they hope the federal government's new $250 million Oral Health Access Fund will help address some of them. Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos says he'll carefully consider feedback like this as the dental plan is developed. Bethany Lindsay, CBC News, Vancouver.
In Hong Kong, the chair of the pro-democracy Civic Party says after today's proceedings, his party will no longer exist. Alan Leong says the majority of members voted to disband the party, with only one member abstaining.
When we held our annual general meeting last year, the fate of the party was already dictated by the fact that nobody came forward to seek election as the chairman or the executive committee.
The Civic Party has been one of Hong Kong's biggest and most moderate democratic parties, appealing to many middle-class voters. But China's implementation of its national security law and overhaul of its electoral system has greatly reduced democratic opposition. In 2020, a number of Civic Party members were arrested for allegedly violating Beijing's national security law, while many others have fled the country.
तो मैं इसकी आखिर में अपील करता हूं कि बातचीत करनी चाहिए फौरी तौर पे.
Former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan appealing for talks amid a standoff with the country's all-powerful military. Khan is facing more than 100 charges, including corruption. There's even the possibility his party, the PTI, could be outlawed. Khan was booted out of office in a no-confidence vote in 2022. Recent weeks have seen clashes between his supporters and authorities, including attacks on army barracks. Let's get more on the situation from Islamabad. Abdul Sattar is a freelance journalist in Pakistan's capital. Abdul, Imran Khan became prime minister having the strong backing of the military, but the army has turned against him. What happened to change their support for Khan?
The turning point came on 6 October 2021 when the army transferred former ISI chief General Faiz Hamid to Peshawar, and Imran Khan, in a way, delayed it for at least 6 weeks, challenging the authority of the army. There were speculations that he was also advised by the army not to visit Russia in February last year, but he ignored such advice. Khan also chose to be neutral, when Russia invaded Ukraine, while the then army chief, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, described the attack in April last year as an invasion. During the same month, he was removed from power. Khan first blamed the United States of hatching a conspiracy to oust him. He also lambasted a senior ISI official and has been coming hard on current army chief. So this all broadened the gulf between the two former allies, reaching a point of no return on May 9 when Khan's supporter attacked army offices and military installations.
Now, many of his supporters have been arrested and turned over to the military to face trial. How unusual is this, and what are the implications of it?
Well, it's not unusual because you know that Pakistan has faced martial law for more than 30 years of its existence. And during Khan's time, around 25 civilians faced trials in military courts, including the prominent human rights activist Idris Khattab. There are certain sections of Pakistani laws that permitted later on in the aftermath an attack on APS or Army Public School. Such trials are not considered transparent, and there are fears that today they could be used against Imran Khan, but in the future they could be used against other political parties. There is a nationalist insurgency going on in Western province of Pakistan. That is the sort of the center of China-Pakistan economic corridor. So such laws could also be used there, and they could also be used against human rights activists and other activists as well. This could become a legal precedent, and then it could be employed against anybody who might violate such laws.
Now, Khan is also facing challenges within his own party. Dozens have quit. What could that mean for his political career?
Well, critics believe here that Khan might make tall claims, but in reality, his party was stuffed with electable, or what we call traditional politicians in Pakistan. They are also called political opportunists who can switch their loyalty anytime. So there is a section of the people who is leaving his party. In reality, they had been asked by the intelligence agencies in 2011 and after 2011 to join the party of Khan. So naturally, those people, most of whom are from southern Punjab of Pakistan's, Punjab's province, they are leaving that. But Khan is still popular. If elections are held, maybe in next few months, he would still win those elections. If the current government also makes efforts to deliver on the promises that it made almost a year ago, then maybe things could change. But for now, Khan is popular, and naturally, if there are elections in few weeks or in few months, he is most likely to win a number of seats.
Abdul, thank you so much for this insight.
Thanks a lot.
Abdul Sattar is a freelance journalist in Islamabad. Heavily armed special police officers are guarding municipal buildings in northern Kosovo after clashes erupted last night. Police fired tear gas at a crowd trying to block a newly elected mayor from entering his office. The majority of the town's residents are Kosovo Serbians, but the mayor is ethnically Albanian, as are most in the southern part of the country. The mayor won the April vote after Serbs boycotted the election. The tension exists beyond Kosovo, too. Serbia has placed its army on full combat alert and ordered units to the Kosovo border. The U.S. has called on Kosovar authorities to de-escalate the situation. 2 U.S. citizens have died from a suspected outbreak of fungal meningitis linked to cosmetic surgery in Mexico. Hundreds more could be at risk, including some Canadians. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say the infections are tied to 2 clinics in the border city of Matamoros. The CDC says it is working closely with Mexican health authorities and urging anyone who had epidural anesthesia at one of the clinics from January 1st to May 13th to get tested for meningitis, even if they don't have symptoms. On any given night, as many as 35,000 people don't have a place to stay, according to Statistics Canada, and municipalities are struggling to find solutions to the homelessness crisis. But people in one Ontario city have come up with a novel way to get people off the street. Nick Purdon went to Kitchener-Waterloo to see it firsthand.
They call it a better tent city. 42 8x10 tiny houses on a small piece of land in Kitchener-Waterloo. Diana Myers has lived here for 3 years. Like all the 50 or so residents, she used to be homeless.
I feel good about myself, that I'm not on the street, that I have a roof over my head.
If you were still out on the street for those 3 years, where do you think you'd be at?
Oh boy, I don't know. Probably dead or something.
I mean, that's how people feel here. The stakes are that high. Nadine Green runs the place.
Coming from being out there on the street, I've seen people cry when they get their keys to their house. Thank you for saving my soul. That's what they would say.
Green, along with a few other private citizens, started the project and paid for it with private funds. Another one of the founders, Jeff Wilmer, is a retired city planner. He says demand for the tiny houses keeps going up and they now have a waiting list.
This is a stopgap measure. This is not the end solution, although it's a pretty good stopgap measure. And this is partly why we called it a better tent city. It's not perfect, but it's better than living in a tent because you've got your own cabin with insulation and electricity and heat, and you've got meals and you've got community. All those things are better.
Wilmer says he's been contacted by cities across the country who want to mimic the idea. And just a few kilometers away, the Waterloo region has built 50 tiny houses of their own. Tiny houses could be a new way municipalities try to solve homelessness.
Oh, this is my home. Come on in.
Joe Lima shows me what it's like to actually live in one of them. Lima is proud of his place. He has Amazon Prime and a security camera.
The camera I bought off a friend of mine because I had a little wagon outside and somebody stole it. So I put a camera up and now I can catch anybody.
Lima used to own his own house, but because of addiction and other problems, he lost everything. He's been living here for a year now.
What is coming and living here? What's it done for you?
Well, it's changed my life. You know, I come here with not much to live for. I was not going to do anything stupid, but really depressed. And this place has brought me thinking better about life, everything else, and it's brought me back. I'm smiling again, even though I'm missing my teeth, right? But yeah, I'm happier now than I have been a year ago, yes.
Lima explains he's a heavy machinery operator and he's ready to move out.
Right, I'm looking for a job right now. Get back to work and, pass this wonderful little cabin to somebody that deserves it and is willing to give me $500,000 for it.
If Lima does move out, that'll be a prime example of the stability this place provides to people. Organizers say 4 people have left and moved into their own apartments in the past few years. Nick Purdon, CBC News, Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario.
You're listening to The World This Weekend on CBC Radio. I'm Chris O'Neill Yates. In the new series Little Bird, a First Nations woman from Montreal returns to Saskatchewan to reconnect with her identity, decades after she was removed from her birth family. It has mostly an Indigenous cast and was written and directed by Indigenous creators. As Eli Glasner tells us, Little Bird's showrunner says that she hopes the lived experiences can help shine a light on a dark period of Canadian history.
At red carpet events in Winnipeg.
I love this team and I love this province.
And Toronto.
Oh, I just wanted to be a part of this from the very beginning.
There's a buzz around Little Bird.
L'chaim.
A new series about a woman who was adopted by a Jewish family in Montreal who leaves her marriage to find the Indigenous family she was taken from.
Your children were apprehended. They are under the care and protection of the government now.
When producers were looking for a collaborator and showrunner, there was only one person that fit the bill, Jennifer Podemsky.
They mentioned, wanting to do this show about an Indigenous woman adopted into a Jewish home, and I was like, yes. As a Jewish Indigenous person who, feels very deeply embedded in both of my cultures, and be able to bring that experience to a story was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Little Bird explores the period known as the 60s scoop, when the Canadian government forcibly removed as many as 20,000 Indigenous children from their families.
When we were shopping this originally, people who were reading it, even, smart, educated people, were shocked that they did not know anything about this.
Lead actor Darla Contois was ready to quit acting when Podemsky DM'd her on Instagram. Then the phone rang.
When she called me and told me I got the role, I was very emotional. I instantly started crying because It's not lost on me, the gravity of working with her.
Look, this isn't personal, but you're on our land.
From acting on the res to producing shows such as Empire of Dirt and the documentary series Future History, Podemski has fought to make space for Indigenous voices. Indigenous filmmakers Zoe Hopkins and Almaya Tailfeathers say they directed episodes of Little Bird in large part because Podemski advocated for them.
Jennifer is a leader with all caps. You know, she's such a huge supporter. She blew the door open for Almaya and I to be at the helm of this show.
At Little Bird's premiere, an audience filled with 60 Scoop survivors are welcomed in the theater with a song. For Podemski, Little Bird is an opportunity for healing and learning.
We have the power to amplify things that have been in the dark and have the power to change people's minds and points of view and create connections that might never have been created.
Medicine, she says, in the form of storytelling. Eli Glasser, CBC News, Toronto.
I'm your private dancer, a dancer for money. Do what you want me to do.
This week, the world said goodbye to Tina Turner. The Queen of Rock and Roll died at age 83. People around the world have been sharing their memories of her, including here in St. John's.
I want to make $1 million. I want to live out by the sea.
Of all the places in the world the megastar could have chosen to kick off her private dancer tour in July 1985, she picked St. John's, Newfoundland. In a CBC interview, she described the feeling she got gazing out at St. John's Harbour from her hotel.
I have a view from my window. It looks like the neck going out to the sea. That is very soothing, just to wake up in the morning to have my coffee to it.
That's why Turner came to the city. She wanted a quiet place to rest before her tour. Susan Shirk remembers being asked to play tennis with someone who was in town. The person told her it was a celebrity, but didn't say who. When Shirk showed up at the tennis court, she was shocked to find Turner herself waiting to play a game.
I was so surprised that she was so down to earth. She does have great legs, but she talked about being a Buddhist. This really helped her through the tough times. And I got to ask her about her hair because, that was one of her signatures.
And no, those wild dews were wigs, part of her onstage persona.
You're simply the best. Better than all the rest.
Turner felt that St. John's was simply the best, a place where she could relax. Turner told the media at a news conference that she needed to step back and chill.
We needed a quiet place. The musicians can get sort of sidetracked. And we plan to sort of hit a few of the little night spots before we go.
Turner would say hi to locals as she and the band were spotted walking downtown, but people let them be. 40 years later, you'd have to wonder if she'd get that kind of privacy with cell phone cameras and social media and celebrity culture. But 1985 in St. John's, Turner was able to relax and recharge. Starting with 4 nights on her world tour in our port city, Turner played to sold-out crowds. And listening to people remember her this week, it seems the Queen of Rock and Roll left a lot of good memories behind. We leave you now with a little more private dancer from Tina Turner. You've been listening to The World This Weekend. I'm Chris O'Neill Yates in St. John's. Good night.